what's more broken? Is it TradFi payment rails or Web3 user experience?
Older generations are starting to use it,
Yeah.
a replacement for Google, right?
Yeah.
Younger generations are using it as a life advisor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the youngest generations are using it like an operating system. I think that's where I see the future of payments going, is really being embedded into the everyday platforms and products that people use. We're rolling out a Riva token, which really allows users who participate in our network, either by inviting friends or by transacting, to benefit from the value of the network growing, right? And I think that's also a new way of thinking about a payments network.
Hello and welcome to the Ecosystem Show. I'm Ade Molajo, your host, and today I'm joined by Adrian. For those who don't know him, he's the founder and CEO of Reveal, the first universal stablecoin ID and AI-powered payments network. With over a decade of experience innovating in banking and FinTech, Adrian has led digital transformation efforts at BNP Paribas, CIB, and consulted as a new venture architect for institutions like Wells Fargo, Banco Sabadell, and Munich Re. Prior to FinTech, though, Adrian co-founded Bridge Music, a record label and recording studio where he produced Grammy-nominated artists. His deep expertise in media led him to manage the first ever integration of Amazon Alexa into smart earbuds. Adrian has a bachelor's degree in Sciences of Management from HEC Lausanne and an MBA from ESADE and UC Berkeley Haas. Adrian, so good to see you. How are you doing?
Thanks, Ade. I'm great. I love this intro. I wish I could have you on all my calls doing this introduction.
Great to have you on the show. I've got a few questions for you, and I'll just dive straight in.
Sure.
You and I both came from Deloitte Digital. What did you see in consulting that made you want to build something radically simpler than the legacy systems that we were advising on?
Specifically about being in consulting, I wonder if you've had that experience as well, but often you're working for very big institutions who have a very different risk appetite than, startups. The innovation that you can bring is more incremental than disruptive. Very few big organizations are really willing to put a lot of effort and resources into technology that might disrupt their core business. As much as I really enjoyed my time at Deloitte Digital Ventures, and we were part of a team where we were actually bringing new businesses, building almost spin-offs and bringing new business lines to market, I think it still felt like there was so much that we could do that we weren't allowed or just simply mandated to look at. And so eventually that's what sort of drove me to want to move into really startup world instead of just the venture building world as a consultant. That's the biggest distinction, I think.
But what would you say is the reason these big firms aren't so crazy about disruption? Is it because they don't want to cannibalize on the business models that they have so carefully crafted and are profiting off of?
Yeah, there are some organizational elements to that, right? Like a big company is kind of like a big pack boat. It has inertia and it's very slow to turn it into a new direction. As you mentioned, as a big business and a business that has grown to thousands and thousands of employees, and a lot of these big financial institutions are global, there have been a lot of resources put into crafting those business models. And it's not something you want to disrupt right away. You want to get a return on investment on that. They're really around
That's
that,
right.
all of those efforts before you start looking at how you can extract value in other ways or how you can properly disrupt your business, which is why I think the incremental innovation makes a lot of sense. You're trying to bring efficiencies, you're trying to increase the return on investment. Disruption is a very different game. And so I find that a lot more exciting, which is why I eventually
Absolutely.
decided to go and build my own startup. Coins are enabling a new way of thinking about how money moves, and that has real disruptive potential. And it's interesting to see the big financial institutions start looking at stablecoins, because I think they're realizing that it's an inevitability will happen. It's just a question of how quickly and how disruptive it's going to be. And so you are starting to see a bit more aggressive, sort of initiatives from some of these big banks in that direction. And I think that's remarkable because it requires a significant to be willing to look at new technology.
Yes, agreed. And you touched on something that we're going to speak about now, essentially stablecoins. Let's be honest, what's more broken? Is it TradFi payment rails or Web3 user experience?
I think they're both broken to some extent, though maybe broken is not the right word when it comes to Web3 payment experience, building it. So I don't think it's broken yet. It definitely is not done. There's still a lot of work to be done there. The traditional payments are, have basically not evolved for several decades, right? And so we have these complex systems with a lot of intermediaries and, quite frankly, just a lot of manual work. It's not uncommon that if you're doing an international transaction, you might call your bank to figure out where that transaction is at, and they can't necessarily locate exactly where the money is.
Don't get me started.
There is no doubt that traditional payments are broken. And at the same time, there have been some amazing innovation, specifically, I think, in emerging markets. In Brazil, they have Pix. In India, they have UPI. Like, these are really efficient, real-time payment systems that are getting massive adoption in those specific regions. What's amazing about stablecoins is all of a sudden you have a ledger and these rails that are global, right? And all the limitations that you have due to the fact that you need so many intermediaries in traditional payments are lifted. It's a great innovation. However, you're also right that we're not done innovating, and the user experience today of a real Web3 payment, and I say real Web3 payment because you've got some payments that use Web3 rails, but that are still very abstracted. Dollar is moved on chain to a stable coin, let's say like USDC. The transaction happens then on chain, maybe it's a cross-border transaction, so US to Mexico. And then in Mexico, the funds are moved back into fiat, into Mexican pesos, to stablecoin, to fiat.
That's right.
That's pretty good today. We're seeing rapid adoption of that type of stablecoin driven transaction. And that's because we can abstract the entire on-chain experience. I see an issue is that we're going to move away from stablecoin sandwich type of transactions. And this is in part due to the fact that all these financial institutions are announcing that they want to have their own stablecoin. And so if they have their own stablecoin, they're going to incentivize their customers to hold balances in those stablecoins, probably by sharing some of the yield. And so what happens when a Bank of America customer is holding stablecoins at Bank of America wallets? PayPal user who's holding PYUSD, because PayPal actually announced that they're incentivizing people to hold PYUSD by sharing some yield. And more balances will remain in stable coins, right? And so you're going to start seeing transactions between, maybe a consumer and a business, where the consumer has PYUSD and the business has an account at Bank of America and is holding no longer a stablecoin to stablecoin transaction. However, these are stablecoins potentially on different blockchains. And so we have a fragmentation issue in the stablecoin space, especially as we move towards that future. This is really where our efforts at Reveal are focused on. It's like, how do we facilitate transactions in that future where a lot of the funds remain in stablecoins? There are probably different stablecoins on different networks. And can we facilitate a Web3 payment experience that doesn't feel like a Web3 payment experience today? Because swapping from one stablecoin to another.
Mm.
And then obviously having to manage complex wallet addresses, and you have different wallet addresses for different in
Yeah.
terms of facilitating mass adoption of
Mm.
stablecoins.
Yeah. And fragmentation is the name of the game. You know, in the emerging markets, USDT has taken a strong hold. Right now, we're looking at 200 plus stablecoins on 50 different, or maybe even more than 50 different chains.
Yeah.
Are we decentralizing payments right now?
I think we're in the early days. Coins are proving to be a super powerful use case for crypto and are finding product market fit. A lot of players want in. The issuer of USDT is one of the most profitable businesses per employee.
That's
So
right.
being in the stablecoin space can be extremely lucrative. I think because we're going to see a lot more entrants come in, eventually it's going to be about who distribution and who
Mm-hmm.
can create network effects around their stablecoin. And I am a big believer that we will live in a multi stablecoin world. Now, I don't think all of these stablecoins will necessarily be known by the end user.
Mm.
Some of them may get to the point of having their own brand, right? I think USDT,
Yeah.
USDC, maybe. Um, I think a lot of them will just live under the hood.
Yeah.
You'll
So,
see account balance at Bank of America, and a portion of that might be in stablecoin, and you don't
mm,
necessarily. With that, I think we'll always see some degree of fragmentation. I don't know if we'll always have as many USD based stablecoins that we have now. However, I also think there will be fragmentation within each specific fiat pegged.
mm,
We're seeing a lot of USD pegged stablecoins, and they probably will maintain dominance. I'm pretty sure we're going to start seeing more and more stablecoins pop up for different currencies.
yeah.
And I believe that in the long term, we'll probably see FX on chain. Every currency will have one, maybe multiple stablecoins, depending on
Yeah.
how local authorities also sort of participate in that, and whether
Yeah.
we're going the sort of the CBDC route or the privatized stablecoin route. So it's we're still in the early innings of what
Mm-hmm.
stablecoins are going to be. And
Mm-hmm.
there is a certain degree of chaos due to the fact that everyone wants now a piece of this opportunity. Makes it very exciting for a startup like Reveal.
Yeah. It's the gold rush moment. But if we dive a bit deeper, and specifically at Reva, which promises text-driven AI native interface, do we really want AI agents managing our money? Isn't there a trust gap there?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think there is a generational gap. Just the other day, Sam Altman said something really interesting, which was that when you look at the way different generations use ChatGPT, at least that was his example, older generations are starting to use it simply as like
Yeah.
a replacement for Google, right?
Yeah.
Younger generations
Yeah.
are using it as a life advisor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the youngest generations are using it like an operating system.
Yeah.
And so I think that in the same way that there, has been sort of degrees of adoption for,
Yeah.
mobile phones,
Yeah.
technology, I think we're going to see the same with AI. And today we are still cautious about what type of permissions we grant an agent.
Mm.
And that's like legitimate. There are still hallucinations. That is
Yeah.
still, we're also going to get better and better at setting really good guardrails for agents to act within specific rules. And our trust in these systems is going to grow. So I think it's really a matter of a few years until we feel very comfortable letting an agent do payments for us. And
Mm.
I think that'll change pretty quickly.
Yeah. And will it be just payments, or will we see agents helping us find the latest alpha?
Oh, I am pretty sure it'll go way beyond payment. And
Yeah.
the concept of a robo-advisor is not a new thing, right? I
Sure.
think of a trading agent as almost like
Mm-hmm.
the next iteration of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be really interesting to see how that democratizes, access to more complex financial strategies. A lot of the tasks that are sort of transactional, AI
Yeah.
is going to an obvious sort of new user interface.
Yeah. And you're abstracting away wallets, you're abstracting away gas, you're abstracting away chains, all of it. Do you worry that creating a crypto UX paradox where users don't learn the fundamentals but just trust Reva will be detrimental to crypto education?
I don't think so. And I also don't think that everyone needs to be quote unquote crypto educated.
True.
Our whole lives depend on the internet today, right? At least not for mass market adoption. And I guess this goes to show that we're still in the early phase of adoption, right? Like most crypto Web3 users have some technical inclination or degree of curiosity that makes them want to understand the technology, at least to
Yeah.
some extent. Can't be a prerequisite to using any technology, in my opinion. Technology should be a facilitator of whatever we're trying to accomplish, and not bring up new barriers. Is what is necessary for it to actually scale. And so, what we're working on is at Reveal, we have an infrastructure sort of layer, which we call Pay ID, and that's our universal stablecoin ID. And that goes to, facilitate those stablecoin to stablecoin transactions that we were talking about, which we call Riva, which has a peer-to-peer sort of payments app, and then an AI agent that we've just rolled out and that we're embedding into social media and messaging platforms so that you can really just text the agent to trigger a payment, right? Sort of like a text to pay type of experience, if you will. And we're getting really great feedback from younger users who are used to having sort of services meet them where they are online. So instead of having to, if you're chatting with friends on Discord because maybe you're playing a game at the same time, instead of having to switch to an application in order to send $5 to your friend so they can buy a new, you can now just text Riva, the agent, and it'll execute that payment for you, and you haven't left the platform. And I think that's where I see the future of payments going, is really being embedded into the everyday platforms and products that people use to the entire new financial system that can be built via stablecoins, right? If you had a type of payment solution, it was in-game, right?
That's right.
And you had to use your credit card, or whatever. What stablecoins enable and what we're looking to enable with payment, so that a user that's on Twitter can pay a user that is playing a specific game or using Discord, who can pay a user who is on their wallet, right? It's how do we really create a connected tissue for payments? And that's really sort of the core of the ethos behind Reveal and the products.
And you mentioned users will be able to just text Riva to pay their friends. Are we looking at a future where Riva is integrated into an application like Discord? Or will this take the place of Discord in a situation where two people are playing a game and chatting at the same time?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, the first step is definitely an integration into the existing messaging and social media platforms. We're rolling out Riva with its own terminal, so you can set up your account and you can actually initiate payments there. The second integration is Twitter and X, right? And so you'll be able to simply text in DMs or on the public thread with Riva and initiate a payment there. And so that opens up a whole like types of use case, which I find super interesting. And we're looking to integrate with more and more of these messaging and social media platforms, WhatsApp and all the different meta products and Discord. And we are talking to also games, right? So I think there's a lot of potential for being able to integrate either Pay ID or directly the agent Riva into products to just have that embedded payment experience. It's a new way of thinking about payments without necessarily owning the interface, but being able to own the experience. And I think AI and agents enable that in a really interesting way.
And earlier you mentioned Gen Zs, or the youngest internet generation of users. They are using something like ChatGPT as an OS. So I'm guessing this is your first target demographic. How are you going about gaining their trust and making sure that you can monetize this demographic and retain them at the same time?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It is very difficult. And what we've figured out is that the best way is through referrals, right? And obviously,
Mm,
you have to be able to get in initially into some groups. For us, that has been gaming and different online communities. But then we see, so we have a 2x referral rate
mhm.
within our products. And so for every user that we're able to onboard, they then bring in 2 friends, right?
Yeah,
And that trust sort of element is very different when a friend of yours says, "Hey,
yeah,
use that."
exactly.
That's really important for us. I think in terms of how I think about scaling, by 2030, I believe it's about like 2.5 billion Gen Zs will be adults, right?
Hmm.
So we're talking about a massive user base here.
True.
That's where they live, and we're building a payment solution that is designed for that specific behavior, if you will.
Yeah,
Obviously, it's important for us to be in touch with those trends, but then the referral mechanisms are crucial for us.
yeah.
And I think perhaps one thing I'll add around this is, and this is the beauty of building an on-chain and a decentralized um, business, is that we can design incentives through tokenomics
Hmm.
that help that community grow and feel incentivized to participate. And so around Riva and our Riva products, we're rolling out a Riva token, which really allows users who participate in our network, either by
Hmm.
inviting friends or by transacting, to benefit from the value of the network growing, right?
Mm.
And I think that's also a new way of thinking about a payments network, because traditional payments network have the
Yeah,
intermediaries extract all the value,
exactly.
right? Because the payments infrastructure on top of stablecoins is much simpler.
Hmm.
There are real cost benefits there, especially when you talk about cross-border payments. And so there are new sort of mechanisms and incentives that you can design to make sure that the community that's
Hmm.
participating in this can benefit from it. All right.
Mm.
This idea of being able to actually have some quote unquote ownership stake into the products that they use. So all of these things I think tie together to offer a solution that we think fits well for that demographic.
Yeah. What is it
Yeah.
that you've found out that other projects just aren't clued up on?
Look, I think when it comes to having sort of these viral moments that have allowed us to lower our CAC, we have been fairly lucky, but also very prepared. And so, you know, for us, it's been about how are we able to create some buzz with the communities
Hmm.
that we're looking to onboard, and then once we're there, how do we make sure that that can go viral and be shared and that we can leverage that traction? And we've been fortunate because we've been able to do that more than once. That has allowed us to build a really solid community around Reveal and
Hmm.
have a real growing user base. There is a lot of preparation to make sure that you can capture that attention and that you can incentivize referrals and that
Hmm.
you can obviously retain users. I don't think magic sauce there, besides a lot of hard work, preparation, and a
Yeah.
little bit of luck. I will say that, the mix of being sort of social first and community
Yeah.
driven in how we've been
Yes.
building has been
Hmm.
very important.
Hmm.
So before we even had a product, we've been sharing the vision online, and we've been able to build a community on Twitter and in Discord.
Yeah.
This sort of like building with the community, or community led growth, I think is a concept that I would refer to fellow entrepreneurs who are
Yeah.
looking to scale in this space. And I think so far we've been very lucky because that has allowed us to have this like insanely low CAC. We're very aware of the fact that as we scale, obviously the CAC is going to grow. Now we're at $1.03, right? Which is ridiculously low for the payments and FinTech, if you will, product.
Yeah.
But that will certainly change in the future.
And moving on from that, 75% of revenue goes towards token buybacks. Where's the decentralization in that model?
That's a great question. It's a pretty common model for Web3 businesses. There is some degree of centralization, although I think depending on the protocols, this can also be more or less transparent. Having a rev share that goes towards buybacks, especially for applications, is a great way to bring value back into the token. And we feel like that's what allows us to create this payments network where the participant in the network actually gets value from the network growing and from more. So the way it works is, if you refer a friend, you'll get some tokens. If you do transactions, you get sort of a cashback percentage in tokens. By holding the token, you can access, advanced features, sort of premium subscription. You can obviously pay for transaction fees with the token. And then all of the revenue from transaction fees, from subscription model, 75% initially of that goes towards buybacks, right? So as we buy back tokens from the market, the value of the token increases. And so those participants who have been receiving tokens for referring friends or transacting see the value of their tokens increase and participate in the growth of the whole Riva ecosystem. I think that's awesome. Like imagine if each time you did a transaction on Venmo, you received some Venmo points, and the more people were on the network, the more valuable these Venmo points become. We're implemented through the Riva token. Web3 businesses and tokenomics really allow you to do in a way that is much more transparent, that is, on-chain and traceable, where users can actually audit and see where all these tokens are. And so, we're very excited about rolling this out. I think it's a paradigm shift in terms of how you build a payments network.
If Reva fails, what's the most likely reason why?
Look, if you think of Riva as a peer-to-peer payment solution, consumer peer-to-peer payment space. I mean, we just mentioned Venmo and PayPal. Pretty much in every country, you've got some equivalent, right? What we're doing to hedge against that is that we're building in a very different way. We're building global first. And so we're finding a niche of users who can't do what they want to do with PayPal because they're transacting with someone who's in a different country and doesn't have Venmo or PayPal. And so that is one way to hedge around that. But nevertheless, fierce competition in the peer-to-peer payment space. I think the other risk is perhaps around the speed of adoption of AI. And this goes to the question that you were referring to earlier, which is like, can we trust AI to make payments, right? I think we're obviously at the forefront of this and sort of testing that thesis out. We believe that younger generations are ready for this. How quickly can we move beyond a Gen Z segment and into other demographics is also going to be important because in the end, payments are primarily like network effect driven business models.
Lastly, would you trust Reva to run the payroll for your startup?
Yeah, I think eventually, for sure. We're starting with a very simple, like a peer-to-peer transaction, right? And we're also establishing a cap on how much you can transact with Riva, at least initially, right? We want to make sure people can build trust around the product. We have a whole roadmap of what we want to enable Riva to do, right? Start recurring payments, send invoices, pay invoices at scale. I am sure that Riva will be able to run your payroll. and pay all your bills and remind people that they have an invoice to pay. Maybe you've sent out an invoice to Riva and they'll ping that person to remind them that that invoice needs to be paid. The way we think about Riva in the long term, a payments assistant, how close to like a CFO can we get with that? Our community, we look at where are the requests in terms of features.
That's a feature that I personally am looking forward to. So if the listeners want to find you online, on Twitter, on Discord, what handle should they be searching?
Yeah, so for Reveal, the handle pretty much on all socials is going to be R3VL_XYZ. The website is reveal.id. And then from there, you can find all of our products, whether it's the Pay ID, which is that infrastructure, universal stablecoin ID, or the Riva AI and Riva Pay products. On Twitter, Riva is RivaPay_AI. So definitely follow the agent, and the agent will guide you through how to get started with the network. From our website, you can find our different socials. And for myself, my handle's Adrien Stern, pretty much on all the different platforms. One word, people can follow me there.
Thanks so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Ade, thanks for having me on.